Welcome to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Today we have Jennifer Reeder on the show. Jennifer is the writer-director behind one of the latest movies from IFC Midnight, Knives and Skin. Knives and Skin is a movie that I don't even know how to begin describing. You just have to see it. It's on one hand a trippy David Lynch-style nightmare while being a deeply disturbing portrait of suburban America that's reminiscent of Todd Solondz, but it's not derivative of either of these directors. No, Knives and Skin is very much its own beast. In it, Jennifer created a beautifully surreal and ironic world that has the kind of clarity of vision, confidence, and cohesiveness of someone like Charlie Kaufman or Spike Jonze, all while being entirely a unique voice. All in all, Knives and Skin is a real treat and a real experience, and hands down one of the most exciting new visions in horror to date. I had a really great time having this conversation with Jennifer, and I honestly can't wait to see what she does next. Now, without further ado, please give it up for Jennifer Reeder. How's it going? Congratulations, first of all. Knives and Skin was... I found there to be something so miraculous about it, because when you have a tone like that, and the actors are all kind of on that exact same level, I can imagine that being incredibly complex to direct. But when it comes together, there's a real kind of synergistic magic to creating a world as specific as that. And it's rare to see a movie like this that just feels like it's so pure to your directorial vision.
Knives and Skin in its final draft is exactly the film that I set out to make. I know that is not something that, all writers and directors get to say, but it really and truly is exactly the film that I set out to make. And it was not a difficult film to direct. I am based in Chicago, which has a really vibrant and super well-respected theater scene. And we cast this entire film out of Chicago, and in particular out of that theater scene. So, for instance, 4 of the adults in the film are Steppenwolf ensemble members.
Oh, that's cool.
All of the young people have extensive theater experience. All the people in the film, in addition, also have experience in front of a camera doing, film and television. So there wasn't ever a moment where I was trying to, bring someone's performance, down to the camera as opposed to sort of, how one might act on stage. But what that meant in terms of being able to use all of these really brilliant theater actors who I consider totally fearless. I would say that about all professional theater actors. I mean, there's something that really is totally fearless about a person who, night after night after night will do what they do in front of a live audience with all of those variables that could change it in any moment. Right. And that was absolutely the case for the actors in this film. And what I did say to them ahead of time was that we were going to create something that felt like it was really hovering just above reality in terms of its visual, so it was going to have this kind of atmosphere that would be really distinct.
Right.
And then I reminded them all that there was so much melodrama in the story itself that I wanted them to really lean into less affect, at the very least, deadpan, at the most extreme. And that actually seemed to make sense to everybody. No one argued with me with that on that point. Some people didn't get it on the first couple of takes.
Right.
I mean, the young people in particular sort of wanted to kind of go to that like teen angst place.
Right.
And I would let them finish the scene and say, let's take it again. Less. And then I would finally get the performance that I wanted. And for me, the kind of absurdity of the film, or the more awkward parts, or even the most kind of eccentric parts, I feel like the way that they work is because they're grounded in really authentic, believable performances.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned the fearlessness of theater actors. And I was going to ask, was there something that made you specifically want to work with theater actors in this regard?
Well, in Chicago, that's really what you have.
Right.
There are no movie stars living in Chicago. Well, I take that back. John Cusack lives in Chicago.
Okay, right.
I think Hannibal Buress lives in Chicago now. But Chicago actors are theater actors,
right?
And I have for a long time, mined from that community in the short films I've made leading up to Knives and Skin, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite kind of theater actors actually are the improv comedians. I mean, I find that the improvers are even sort of, more fearless, and they are quick.
Right.
I mean, they can turn the temperature of the room, in a heartbeat, because they have to, they have to sort of like read a room from, millisecond to millisecond. And so, when you're doing a scene like so many in Knives and Skin, where the tone of the scene, shifts halfway through, and oftentimes really dramatically, it's important that you have an actor who can navigate that, U-turn effortlessly,
right.
Make that labor invisible, So for instance, in the film, Alex Moss, who plays the substitute teacher, had never done a feature-length film before. He's not an actor. He's a stand-up comedian. And I think he really nailed that part. I mean, he had the right look on the one hand, but he also just has had this way of being able to, like I said, kind of navigate the U-turns in the scenes that he's in, and make that movement, that pacing, seem effortless.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you bring up improv actors, because I always think, as of recently, been feeling like improv is not necessarily a lost art, but having actors who have a background in improv, you don't see a lot of it. And when you observe movies that do have actors who all do improv, there's an unmistakable chemistry because they're all naturally trained to feed off of each other. And I would imagine that in a movie like yours, where the kind of collective energy is so important for all the actors to kind of be on the same level of, improv must have really come in handy.
Absolutely. But really just general, exactly what you just said, that that theater actors are used to genuinely reacting to what their stage partner is giving to them.
Right.
I think, or I wonder sometimes if actors who are exclusively working in film already have that understanding that the scene's going to be cut up, and maybe they really are someone who's acting against, the first AD, not actually acting against the person that they are have a scene with, because it's all going to get cut together. I don't know that for a fact. That's not how I like to work. And I found that, in so many of the scenes that required, some emotional tension, actors who had even already worked together, because actually the sheriff, I'll call her the pregnant mom, the tiger t-shirt mom, and the clown dad are all those the Steppenwolf ensemble members.
Oh, wow.
And they are actually the two, kind of parents, the two sets of parents. They all know each other. They've all worked together. And they all get along actually in real life too. So that wasn't an issue. But they're the way that they really captured a scene and were able to act through it in a pacing that felt really normal and natural, where if we didn't want to cut it at all and use it as one take, we could have. I mean, we didn't. Mostly we sort of like, I like to do cutaways anyway, just for the sake of it. And I was going to say one more quick thing about improv comedians in particular is that casting them in dramatic roles is also a really great idea, and I know that we've seen that all the time. And when, if you look at the serious roles that, Robin Williams did, or even the sort of serious roles that someone like Jim Carrey has done.
Right.
I mean, they're incredibly moving. I mean, all of that emotion literally is under the surface, for those people. I mean, I think that it's great to put them in front of the camera. I am emphatically against, like dating an improv comedian, for the same reasons I love casting them in my film, but that's another story.
Makes sense. The characters all seem to have a multitude of different layers of tragedy and neuroses, and they just all seem so well developed. I was curious as to how you were able to approach each character. For instance, do they all have backstories? How much of it was you telling the actors, here's what happened to you when you were 12 or, whatever, and how much did the actors bring to it? What was the character creation process? Yeah,
that's a good question. And there are a lot of characters. There were a lot of people to keep track of. And everyone does have a backstory. It's not a really extensive backstory. Not because I don't believe in that, or I didn't have time or I didn't want to do it. But it was enough of a backstory so that I could give my actors a place to start, and then they could perhaps figure out the rest, which I think is actually really important, to have the relationship with your actors where you trust what they bring to the set also. And you're not just dictating, you're not dictating to them the character that they are embodying. I'm not good in front of the camera. I cannot act at all. I admire so much. I'm in awe of from the performances in this film, and I gave everybody enough information to kind of get them like into the skin of that character. And then they had to really sort of make it fit with whatever additional information they brought to it.
And they all seem to have a very natural chemistry with each other. And them being stage actors, I would imagine you must have rehearsed pretty extensively.
Not at all.
Really?
Not at all. There was a snafu with the contracts.
Okay.
So no one could get paid until the first day that any of them set foot on set.
Oh, wow.
That's not at all ideal. So we didn't even, because when you're an ethical production, you pay people for their time.
Yeah, of course.
And we didn't have a table reading. I ended up, just tagging along with the wardrobe mistress when she would go to people's houses to do the fitting.
Okay.
And then just kind of talk them through, their character. And everyone was totally amenable to that. Of course, no one said, get out of my house. Where's my paycheck? I mean, these are people also who are deeply committed to acting and would not have taken on this script unless they really believed in it. It is a particular kind of a project. And some of whom I had worked with before. And so, they knew that, they knew exactly what I was doing and why. So we had no rehearsal time at all until people would come on set, and, we would run lines, while the lights, et cetera, were getting set up, or I would have additional conversations when people were getting, going through hair and makeup and whatnot. But everybody came to set, with an idea of who their characters were, with an idea who the other people in that character's life were. Everyone knew their lines. It was a beautiful professional set with also lots and lots of laughing and lots of camaraderie, lots of people staying on set after they'd been wrapped for the day because they wanted to kind of watch other scenes, or they wanted to wait and, have dinner with everybody. It was a really, it was just like a very good vibe set for as brutal as the film is on some level.
Right.
And for as kind of emotionally traumatizing as the film is, it was, the vibe on set was really, powerful and positive.
That's great. I'm so surprised that there were no rehearsals. It sounds like that may have worked in your favor in some way, because the performances feel very cohesive. But I would imagine that, Spielberg doesn't rehearse for whatever reason. There's something about the magic that people bring when they're kind of completely raw when they show up on stage or on screen rather, having not rehearsed it, but
right.
It's pretty interesting.
The stuff that I did that we had to rehearse were, there's a fight scene when a dress gets ripped off. We shot that in the middle of the night, and we did rehearse that because it was we had a stunt coordinator.
Like a stunt,
yeah. So that stuff, there was some rehearsal around that moment, but also just on set. While people were, we scheduled in like an extra 90 minutes in that day so that the stunt coordinator could have some time with the actors, but it was not extensive. And I do think that it's the case that oftentimes the first couple of takes are the best takes. I will usually do another one for safety, or maybe there's a word that really trips up an actor and I just wanted to get it. So but oftentimes I'm not somebody who's like, take 20, take 21.
Right.
I really like to be able to trust my actors and to to sort of get what I get, I suppose. But like I said, everybody who came to set was totally prepared, and I was hoping that would be the case, and they're all professional actors, but you never know.
Right. Did you film in Chicago? Or
yeah.
That was Chicago.
We shot the interiors of the houses were shot in Melrose Park and Jefferson Park, which is like on the north side, actually right under an O'Hare flight pattern.
That must have been a nightmare.
So my poor sound man was, just had a nervous, was constantly on the verge of a nervous breakdown. We shot at the high school is Taft High School, which is also on the north side, which is the school where the story of Grease was based on, because the guy who wrote Grease went to that high school. That was just That's coincidental.
Cool. That's crazy.
But I love that, that was another kind of, it wasn't shot at Taft, but the guy who wrote Grease went to Taft High School. I just loved that it was that tells you how old it is. It's a real vintage school. And then all the exteriors were shot 30 miles south of the city in Lamont, which is a perfect little small Midwestern town. It's got a refinery, it's got a quarry, it's got, 2 rivers.
Very Americana.
Yeah. And so it's not supposed to be, it's not a rural, or it's not an urban story, rather. It's a rural story. And it's a Midwestern story. It doesn't identify itself as being outside of Chicago by any means, and I just simply describe it as Midwestern that certainly covers thousands of miles of land in the middle of the country. But it was great, shooting it in and around Chicago. And that, like I said, there was a Chicago cast, but it was also an all Chicago crew. And the the cast itself is really diverse, and inclusive, and the behind the camera looked the same. As a female director, it felt really important to try to have as many women behind the camera as two, and not just in the art department, which is like common hair and makeup, for instance, but G&E and the camera department, it was like some good girl power on that set.
That's awesome. The movie had such an incredible visual look to it, and some of the shots had such specificity to how they looked. So I'm really curious as to how you worked with your DP and how you were able to develop the look of the movie. I mean, do you create lookbooks? Do you have like photo albums, or how did you create the look, and how did you translate that to your DP?
So my DP, Chris Rojano, and I have worked together for about 6 years. So he and I have worked together a lot and really share a kind of shorthand, not just on set in terms of, just the general kind of logistics, but we like the same movies.
Yeah.
So when we were setting out to make this, I just said I wanted the whole thing to feel like it was, hovering above reality in terms of that production design, which included the lighting palette, for instance, the color palette and the lighting. We knew we wanted to shoot anamorphic. And we settled on Tadeo vintage anamorphic lenses, which do a very kind of specific thing with light. They really can create a kind of a softness around colored light that has this kind of hazy atmospheric sense about it. So that felt also like that felt like the right choice, and so that was a very specific choice to use those vintage lenses. And in addition to that, I just said I needed This is a film about female empowerment, and I want to, I want to think about the color pink. I want to make pink symbolic. So the whole film was kind of drenched in these like pinks and purples and sort of violets, then leaning into kind of turquoise and, cyans and whatnot. So we knew that the color would be vibrant, and we roped in Louis Lukasik as our gaffer, who's actually the head gaffer for Chicago PD. He doesn't get to drench that in magenta on set every day. And we were totally all on board with it. And then we literally did start a group WhatsApp that was kind of our lookbook.
Oh, that's cool.
My production designer, Audrey Sirwatt, did have a super extensive actual, physical sort of lookbook in the production office. Like the walls were just covered with, her images. But we had this ongoing group WhatsApp that included me, Louis, Chris, Audrey Sirwatt, and then her team in the art department that we just jammed up with content, and it involved film stills. We looked at, Argento and other Giallo directors.
Right.
We looked at the cinematography of Robbie Mueller, who's done some really beautiful work with light. But we looked at the fine art photography also of somebody like Gregory Crudson and Todd Hito, who do these really interesting ways with light and tableau, and for instance. And then to deal with the body of Carolyn Harper, we actually looked at a bunch of figure painting, and we sort of settled on Jenny Saville, who makes these kind of really goopy, kind of grotesque figure paintings. So the visual influence was pretty broad.
Interesting. So you wrote the movie, obviously, as well.
I did. I wrote it.
What was your writing process like? Because they had, again, I keep using the word specificity, but there was such a specific tone and way that people talked, and it was consistent. They were all very distinct characters, but you could tell they were in this very cohesive, well thought out universe that feels like, I don't know, somewhere around 10% left of our reality.
Yeah.
But what was the writing process like in order to get into the characters' heads and to get into that specific humanity and that specific kind of universe that you had created? So
the dialogue that I write is very specific and very particular. I set out to, I know that. I don't sort of set out to say like write particular dialogue.
Right.
But as a writer, I know that there are just certain things that I want, certain words that I want a character to use, and certain words that a character will never use, for instance, and I want sometimes the exchanges to feel like feel not poetic, but like poems in a way. And for some of the scenes to feel like they are haiku, if in a specific kind of poem, let's say, because of course, like in reality, I can use my own self as an example. I talk over people, I mumble. There's far too many likes and etc. So, film dialogue can never be actually authentic,
right?
Even the kind of mumblecore films, are nuanced to a point. I really am drawn to, as a consumer of film, this kind of stilted poetic dialogue. And, I was just revisiting the work of Whit Stillman, who did Barcelona and Metropolitan, Last Days of Disco. And his films are compared to like a comedy of manners, which I thought was really interesting to think about my films or Knives and Skin in particular, and the short films leading up to it that are very similarly written. Right. Like in that vein, or even in the way that, like Beckett plays are written. And there was no improvisation. For as much as I said that I love working with people who can improvise, no one was allowed to improvise, and everyone had to stick directly to the script. It's I craft those scenes within an inch of their life.
Right.
And for me, the way that the scenes are constructed, I always know that there's going to be a moment where the scene shifts. Whether it like the scene starts off very serious and ends up funny, starts off funny and serious, starts off sad, ends up in someplace else, or, and I'm using very kind of ham-fisted words, but I'm not finished with a scene until I know that it's going to take a turn. And that's also very specific. And I know that in general, like good screenwriters will always have, each scene has its own kind of arc. I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about like truly a moment where the scene takes a pointed shift and and asks the audience to kind of like reverse and and retrace.
Right.
For some people, I think that's probably going to be frustrating and disruptive, but I really think if you buckle into this film and just let yourself go on the ride, you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. I certainly did. So last few questions. As a writer, director, filmmaker, were there any resources or books that were particularly helpful or formidable to you, either from an artistic perspective or from a career perspective?
Well, in my life outside of, a glamorous film set, I am a university professor. So I teach at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And I, every couple of semesters, I teach a screenwriting class. And we use that Robert McKee book, Story, which of course is satirized in adaptation. But it's a good book. It's a good book to talk a brand new screenwriter through how stories work, why storytelling endures, as an art form, and why you love the films that you love, what makes characters engaging, what makes a reveal impactful, what is a satisfying ending, all of these, really kind of deconstructing what a story is and what storytelling can be, its potential, and then plugging those kind of principles into whatever idea you have seems really important. And so, it's not like I return to that text for, on my, like when I'm not teaching it to kind of recall, but it's always great when every third semester and I come back to teaching that class and I'm like, oh, that's right. Yeah. I could, don't forget the setup and the payoff,
Right.
And I'm not talking about these kind of, like a formula, right? It really is the principle. I mean, it's the case if you, if you go have coffee with someone after this and you say like, hey, something really funny happened to me today. All the elements that he talks about in that book, a kind of inciting incident. And then, you kind of set the story up and then you introduce the characters and then something happens, then people react to it. I mean, those are the principles of any kind of good story that people tell around a dinner table, et cetera.
Right.
So I, for as wacky as maybe Knives and Skin seems to be, I really set out to write a compelling story and compelling characters. And I set out to make a film that is wide open, but that has a satisfying ending, and not just that, but a hopeful ending, for instance. So, yeah. Very cool.
Well, Jennifer, this was so much fun. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Nick.
Any parting wisdom or advice for aspiring filmmakers out there?
Oh, yeah. I always say, show up, say yes, be prepared, and don't be an asshole.
Nice. All right. Thank you again.
Yep.
All right. Really enjoyed that conversation. So here, as always, are some key takeaways from this conversation with Jennifer Reeder. Number one, consider casting theater actors. So Jennifer hails from Chicago, which doesn't have as much of a film scene, but does have a very active theater scene. As such, just about Jennifer's entire cast consists of theater actors, as well as stand-up and improv comedians. Theater actors and comedians not only bring a very strong work ethic to the set, but are usually adept at a very unique level of nuance that can seriously serve their performances. A lot of directors have spoken about the benefits of working with theater actors, among them Stuart Gordon, whose entire cast for Reanimator were, at the time, all stage actors. So if you're making an indie film and you don't happen to live in New York or LA, you might want to consider hitting up your local theater or comedy club for a casting call. Number two, learn story. Jennifer spoke about the importance of learning story and structure and how the book Story by Robert McKee benefited her when she approached Knives and Skin. Despite the fact that Knives and Skin does not follow traditional story structure, it defies the rules in a way that is indicative of understanding the rules. In other words, despite operating on its own unique and surreal plot trajectory, the movie delivers the character arcs, catharses, and payoffs that come with understanding how story works. So Jennifer recommends that you check out Story by Robert McKee. Number three, stick to your vision. Throughout this conversation, you hear me talk a lot about how specific this movie is, and it's because the vision behind it feels so refreshingly raw, unique, and uncompromised. This is how films should be made. A director with a signature as strong as Jennifer's comes with sticking to your guns and not compromising. These are the kind of uniquely voiced films that we need right now. So if you're an indie filmmaker and have a specific vision, please stick to it and follow it all the way to the screen. Anyway, guys, thank you again as always for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you could share it with your friends and family on social media. Don't forget to follow the show on Instagram at I'm Nick Taylor or on Twitter at the same handle. And thank you again for listening to the Nick Taylor Horror Show.